Hi, I'm Bob Hunter from Wood Magazine. One of the great joints for case pieces or any kind of small jewelry box or anything like that is a through dovetail joint. It has a great mechanical advantage, it looks great, and it's also a hallmark of good craftsmanship that a lot of people look for in projects. But cutting these doesn't have to be a difficult process. I like to cut them on a router table using a simple jig that I'll show you here. This is a Keller jig. There are 3 or 4 of these on the market. It works the same as pretty much all of them. It's a simple process. But let me show you how to cut 4 dovetail joints on this in 12 minutes. I have here 4 pieces that would make just a simple little box like I just showed you. So the important thing is to get your stock prepared ahead of time, have it machined to the thickness, the right width and length. The ends have to be square. Get them all cut ahead of time, and then you're ready to start on there. So the first thing we have to do to work with this jig is to mark the thickness on the ends of the board. Just simply lay it flat on there and just make a quick line across. Then we'll do the same thing for the other board. Done. Now we need to find the center point of this board. This will help us align it on the jig. My board is 4 1/4, so I want to mark 2 1/8. There's my center point. Okay. Now on my jig, I've taken the liberty of scribing a center point on one of the fingers. I'm going to cut the tails first, so I'm starting with the tail side of the template. So I've scribed a center line, and then I marked it with a little bit of yellow highlighter just so I can see it easier. So what I want to do is put my board, this is the tail board, I want to line it up so that my center point is right on that scribed line. And then I just want to clamp it to this jig. I'll use 2 clamps on each piece just so it doesn't come loose while I'm routing, just to be safe. Now I want to put a stop block on here against the side so that I can do repeated passes and make sure that every one is exactly the same. So clamp your stop block in place. That looks good. Okay, I've already installed my tail cutting bit in the router. Now I need to bring it up and set the right height. And the way to do that is we're going to bring the top of the cutter right up to that line that we just scribed. So let me bring that down. I want to be just slightly above it, about a 64th to a 32nd of an inch above that line. This way when we glue the box together, those will be slightly proud that you'll trim off. And that looks good there. Lock the router in place. Make sure my safety switch is on, and we're ready to go. Now we're ready to route our first board. Now just flip the board around like this, do the other end. Go to our other tail board and do it as well. Okay, now we're done with the tail boards. So let's take our stop block off. We'll need to change bits over to our pin cutting bit. Incidentally, if you're making more than one project, go ahead and cut all your tails while you've got that set up in place. It's easier to adjust it when you're doing the pins than it is to go back and set up the tails again. Okay, now let's set our jig off to the side for a second here. What we need to do is to take our board that we marked earlier, our pin board. We're going to take the tail board, set it right on here to mark the location of the pins so that we know where to align those. Holding it flush with both edges, just simply make a couple of marks right here. That lets us know where the pins will line up. And then I want to put a center point right in the middle of there, of one of those pins. That gives me an indexing point. Now let's go back to our jig. Now we're cutting from the pin side of the template where the fingers are angled. And again, I've got a scribe line on one of the fingers. So I want to take that center mark that I just made, and I want to line it on there. Bring my stop block back over. Put it right up against there again. Now I need to set the height the same way again. We're going to go right to just slightly above that line that we scribed. The cutting edge right up there. Right there looks good. Okay. And now, because I want to make sure I get a good fit, I don't want to use one of my pieces. So I've got a couple of test pieces cut up, my stop block's in place, so I know that this one's good and set up. So let me get one of my test pieces out to make sure that our setup is correct. And now let's cut a sample joint here. Forgot my safety switch. Now let's test the fit in the pins. Don't worry about any little snags that are flying off. You can sand those away later. And that looks like a perfect fit. They're just a little bit proud that we'll trim off later. Looks like we're good to go. So now let's set up and do our pin boards. Now to cut the other end of the same board, it's important that you keep the same face forward. Just flip it over, put it against the stop block, because your pins have to angle the same direction. Okay, now we've cut all our boards, so let's put our box together. And there you have a nice dovetailed jointed box, all lined up and cut perfectly. Now, before you would glue this up, of course, you would take it apart, sand the inside surfaces, cut the slot for your bottom, or however you're going to do that. Get all that done, then you would glue it up and continue on with whatever piece you're making. The beauty about these kind of jigs is that they work great on a router table, but you can also use them clamped in a vise with a handheld router. Very simple, very quick. Just zip them out and you're ready to go.